So the idea of today's session is that I'm going to be demonstrating the different sections. You are not under any pressure to try and keep up and to do it as we go along. But if you would like to have a go as we go along, that's absolutely fine. So the whole reason that I'm recording today's session is so that I can send you the video at the end, so you can go back, you can watch it, you can pause it, and you can go through the different steps. Okay. So what we're going to cover today is I'll show you where you can get SPSS from on the university network. I'm going to show you how you can input data into SPSS. And I know that this should be something that's quite straightforward, but there are some really simple little tricks that I'm going to show you that will make your life so much easier. I'm then going to show you how you can generate descriptive statistics. So this is, for example, how you can generate means and standard errors. And then I'm going to show you how to do graphs. So we're not going to perform any statistical analysis in today's session. Normally, I would have two completely different sessions on that, one on t-tests and one on ANOVAs, but it is quite difficult to do those kinds of sessions in the current format. So what I will do is I've got a t-test session coming up tomorrow where I give you the background about t-tests. I will also provide a handbook for how to actually do t-tests in SPSS, and then likewise for the ANOVA session I'll do the same thing. If any of you would find it useful to have a bit of a drop-in session for SPSS once you've had a go, if you would like a bit more of a demonstration of how to do actual tests like the t-tests and ANOVAs, then please either let me know in the chat, or when you fill in the feedback form at the end, I will review that and I will take a look. So what I will do now is I'll come out of PowerPoint, and I won't be able to see your comments in the chat whilst I'm showing you SPSS. So I will pause every now and then and I will come back to see if there's any questions. As I say, Paul is here to help with anything that's technical. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste some links. Now, you might have already had some of these links sent to you in an email just earlier. So I'm just going to send you these links because you will find these useful. So the first link is how you can install SPSS if you'd like to download it onto your own computer. And I'll just show you that now. So that link will take you here to the university's software downloads page. Then you would go here to log into the University Software Downloads portal. It will probably ask me to sign in. Might take a few moments. And then you can see that there's a tab here called IBM SPSS. There are two versions, 25 and 24. The different advantages are this is obviously newer. It's a little bit more updated. The downside with this, I think I can hear someone eating their breakfast. Okay, I'm just going to set everything to mute because I think we've got a few microphones that are not muted. There we go. Right. So these two, SPSS, the Amos, I think that all these will do is they will allow you to open an output file that you've already generated in SPSS if you haven't got the whole of SPSS downloaded. So you don't necessarily need these if you're going to install one of these. So the advantages with 25 is that 25 is newer, so it may have some slightly more updated features. The downside is I have noticed a little bit of a difference between 25 and 24. To be honest, the only major difference was when I came to do a two-way ANOVA. I noticed there was something very slightly different about these two. So there will be a bit more support online and demonstrations on YouTube, that kind of thing, using version 24. So pick a version that you think is best for you. You can download that. Once you've downloaded it, I think it will ask you whether or not you want Windows or whether you want Mac. Even though it asks you to add it to the cart, it is free, and then it will probably ask you to check out somewhere. But I'm not going to do that myself because I've already got both of these installed on my own computer. You can also use apps anywhere if you don't want to download it onto your own computer. Now, downloading onto your computer is the best option because it would be more stable, but it is quite a large program. So if you haven't got the room, then you can go here, log into Apps Anywhere. Now, it will probably appear for me as an option because I have used it before. So it is appearing here for me. If you've never used it before, it probably won't be here. So you'll have to go to the plus, and then I think there's a statistics section, statistics, and then here you've got version 25, and that's the one that you use. So this is fine if you've got a good internet connection, but sometimes it can crash, and obviously as soon as you lose internet, you won't be able to use it. So that's the two different ways that I would recommend that you can use SPSS. Also, I've just discovered myself, can you see it says your license will expire in 24 days? So on the 31st of July, the license for the current versions will expire, but because we've got Paul and he is fantastic, you will have noticed that in the links that I sent you, I would have included this one here to renew the license. You can just click on this link, follow the instructions, and it will actually give you a code, so you can actually enter this code for your license. So if you do find that you get a notification on the 31st of July saying you need to renew your license, just visit this page and you can get the code. Okay, so that's only because you are working offline. So let's introduce you to SPSS itself. Now, I already launched it because sometimes it can be a bit slow. So you'll have an icon once it's installed that will be somewhere here on your computer. I simply double clicked it, and what happened was I had an extra box. You might have seen that I shut that down early on. I just had this extra pop-up box, and all that was doing was saying, do I want to have a new data set or do I want to open an existing one? I just pressed close. So it's up to you. You might have one that you've used before and you want to open an existing one. So just to try and get you familiar with SPSS, it has two tabs. So this here, you can see that I'm on data view, the orange one. This one is where you put most of your raw data. I'm just going to make sure that everyone's admitted. There we go. So you can see here, this is the data view. It doesn't mean much until we put data in it. Okay, so don't worry if it doesn't make any sense, it will. This is where the raw data go. The variable view gives you information about your data. So again, difficult to explain whilst there's nothing in there. But at the moment, you're thinking, this doesn't look too dissimilar from Excel. So now let's go to our data file, and there should be a link in the chat if you do wish to do this. But as I say, it's completely fine to just do all of these steps in your own time, follow the handbook. You can always drop me an email if you have any questions, or as I say, if you would like an extra drop in, we can do that. So I've used Excel here because I think that this is a common way for most people to store their data. Now, first of all, you don't have to use Excel. You could actually store your data by inputting it directly into SPSS as you collect it if you prefer. That is absolutely fine. But just because I know that quite a lot of you are probably going to have Excel data sheets. The first thing you need to be aware of is that if you're copying any data into SPSS, if you copy anything with text in, SPSS will then classify that particular column as a text column, and it will refuse to do any statistics with it. I'm sure there's a way of changing the settings somehow, but I haven't yet found it. So my advice is to just start off so that you don't have any of those issues and don't copy any of the text over. I will be copying these names. So this is actually a genuine data set. So these are genuine pieces of data from the Titanic, which, as you probably know, is a ship that sadly sank. So I'm going to just press down the 2 here, which means that the whole row will get selected. I'm then just going to scroll right the way down. This is the quickest way of doing it. You can see I have quite a few entries. I have about 1,300 entries. Now I'm just going to hold down Shift on my keyboard, so that up arrow, press that row, and now all of my data are selected. But importantly, the top bit has not been selected. So the sort of headers, the names of the columns are not selected. So when I do the face-to-face session, I always say, this is the first point at which you can go wrong in this webinar or in this workshop. So I'm now just going to copy my actual data. Now I am keeping these names. I have no intention of doing any statistics with this particular column, so it's fine. And it might be that I want to use SPSS to store my data, so it might be relevant that I know who is who. So it might be good to have a point of reference. So that's why I'm keeping those in there. I have seen YouTube videos where people have been able to do statistics in SPSS with actual text, but as I say, I've not really found the settings to do that yet. But if you want to explore, please do. So now I'm in data view, and I'm just going to select this top left cell. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to do paste. Sometimes it can take a bit longer if you've got quite a large data set, so don't worry if it does take a few moments. So now our raw data are contained in our data. But you'll notice that it's just giving everybody a variable 000 name. It's really not that useful. So this is where we now go to variable view. So what you have to imagine is each of these columns that's going down is now going to become a row that goes across. So each of these rows gives you information about the columns that we had here. So you can see how var1 will match with this row here. So another little trick that I'm going to show you is if you select all of your names, copy them, click away, and then if you do a special paste, so this is the transpose, so anything vertical becomes horizontal and vice versa, you can now order them like this. The other thing to warn you about, SPSS doesn't like special characters. It can handle an underscore, it can't handle a normal dash, it can't handle a space, and a lot of other strange characters like asterisks. It won't like them. I've had labels like these that have gone all the way down a page and I didn't realize I had a special character, and when I've gone to copy and paste them, and I'm talking about having hundreds of these, when I've come to copy and paste, it's just stopped pasting once it reached a special character that it didn't like. So another tip, give everything a nice simple name, don't use any special characters. So let's go back to SPSS. And again, you can either just select the top cell, or I like to highlight all of them. I don't think it makes a difference, and I'm just going to paste. So now I have renamed all of our column headers. So now you can see they all have this. So there's an A here because we have text. So when you do this, when you copy your data over, make sure this is the only column which has an A. None of the other columns should have an A. If it's got an A, that means that SPSS is noticing its text, and then you won't be able to do any of the following steps. You'll also notice anything with text is called string, whereas everything else is numeric. So that's the first thing to check. So I'm just going to go back in now and just check that I haven't got any questions in the chat. Okay, yes, I will be emailing you the handbook and all the links again. So if you have, and the recording. So yes, don't worry if you haven't got anything, I will definitely be giving you that, no problem. So there's also a column here called label. So this is where you can write more information about your different columns. So if somebody inherits your data set, or if you come back to your data set in the future, it's really important that you know what all of these columns are. And I'm going to show you how you can add values in a minute as well. So for example, you might have no idea what that means, but I know that means passenger class. So what I could do here is I could say that this means passenger class. I can add any notes that I want to these labels. I'm not going to do it now because I know what all of these are, but if you want to add any more information, that's where you can put it. The next thing that you need to do, and I'll just go back to data view, can you see that I've got some weird codes here? Can you see that I've got lots of numbers and they probably aren't making a lot of sense? Well, what these are grouping variables. They are categories. I don't know if you remember previous webinars, we talked about nominal data or ordinal data. That's what these are here. So passenger class, so anyone who was in first class was coded as a 1, anyone who was in second class was coded as a 2, and anyone in third class was coded as a 3. Survived, anyone who lived, they got a 1, anyone who died sadly got a 0. Where they came from, if they came from the USA, the United Kingdom, or anywhere else, they got different codes. So we now are going to have a look at these codes, because I know from my own experience that I have gone into a lot of detail to break data up into these different categories, and then I've come back to my data set and I haven't remembered what code I gave all my different groups. And then here, for example, we have age and fare. Do you remember we talked about scale data? So that could be height, weight, everything is continuous. On their own, each of these is numeric. This has a numeric value. This person was 20 years old. This person paid £7.93, might not have been pounds at that point, probably wasn't. Whereas this is not 3. This is not a value of 3. This is simply a code to say third class. So that is the difference here. So anything which is just a category, we need to let everyone know what each of those codes mean. So when you click on a cell here, Now, a little tiny blue box appeared almost instantly there. I didn't do anything special. I just clicked here on this cell and this box popped up. So all you have to do is put in the value. So for example, 1 is the value that was given in the spreadsheet, and I'm just going to label that as first class, and then I'm pressing add. Now, the other reason that you need to do this is because when you actually perform your statistics and you get an output file, you get your actual results. If you've actually coded everything, rather than it saying, well, 2 was significantly different to 1, or this is the p-value of 2 versus 1, it will actually say, this is the p-value of second class versus first class. So again, you don't have to go back and keep having to refer to your own codes, because it will actually use these names that you're adding now in your outputs. So this is the other reason why this is very good practice. So again, so 1 is survived. So unfortunately, I just have to go through all of these, but that's fine, because if you are following along, it gives you time to do the same. So in the handbook that I gave you, so you should have the link to the handbook, and the handbook will look something like this. Okay, so you'll have something like this, and I'm just on section 2 at the moment here. So here we go. So we've moved over the data. So everything is in the handbook. Okay, so again, don't worry if anything has been missed. All these codes that I'm adding now, they are also here in the handbook. So that's where you can find them. Okay, so I'm just going to add now the rest of the codes. There aren't too many. Okay, so now we're on residence. So I know that I think USA, I think, was given a 1. I have got this written down somewhere. No, USA was a 0, sorry. So USA is a 0. So I'm just going to put USA. United Kingdom was a 1. And then 2 was other. Now this is really exciting watching me add all of these. Now name we're not bothering with, we're not really doing anything with those. We don't have to add anything for age or fair because these are scale data, they are not grouping variables. Each of these cells contains a numerical value. Gender is the final one, and we have 0 for males, and then we have a 1 for females. So there we go. So I've now added all of those codes. The next thing, now this isn't vital to performing your statistics by any means, but I think that this is a very useful exercise, because what will happen now is if we actually tell SPSS what kind of data we have, different symbols will appear, and this makes it a lot easier when you come to do your statistics, because when you look at your variables and you want to move them over to decide, well, is this my dependent or is this my independent? It can really help if you can see really quickly which ones are scale or which ones are nominal. So they're a category, for example. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense, because that will become clearer when I move on to a future step. So passenger class. So we would actually classify passenger class as ordinal data because there is an order to them. You would have first, second, third. So, and in this data set, there could be a real effect from this. You know, you could have a situation where people in a higher class were perhaps more likely to survive. So it is relevant that there's an order here. If we were drawing a graph, you would want to have first, second, and third across the bottom on the x-axis. You would want to keep them in order. So they are a category, but they have an order to them. So that's all I'm doing. I'm in the measure one, and I'm literally just clicking on a cell. This arrow appears, and then I can just tell SPSS what we have. So survived is literally falling into a category, yes or no, effectively. So that becomes nominal. Again, residence, it's just nominal. There's no particular order. USA, UK, other, it wouldn't matter which way around you were to put those on a graph. Whereas age and fair are both scale data because each cell contains a numerical value. Gender, again, is just nominal because it just falls into one of those categories. So I'll just go back into the chat, just check that we haven't got any other questions about any of that. Yeah, okay, I think we're okay. I don't think we've got anyone waiting in the lobby. Fantastic. Please do feel free to put any questions in the chat. As I say, I am going to pause every now and then just to have a look at these things. So the next step, missing data. So missing data are very important. You might have a great data set where you don't have any missing data. Well, fantastic. But in reality, when you are collecting, as in this case, hundreds or even thousands of data, at some point, if you're collecting lots of variables, you will have some missing data. And it is important to tell SPSS when you have missing data. For one thing, if you don't, there are certain functions that you will not be able to get to work. So if you do not do the step I'm about to do now, and you try and work through the rest of the handbook I've given you, I have a feeling some of the steps just won't work for you because the data haven't been assigned as missing. Here is an example of a piece of missing data. This is different from there being a 0. Can you see that a 0 is down here as 0.00? So for some reason, SPSS doesn't like to display the first 0. If you do want to change the number of decimal points, so you can see that we've got 2, then you can see that here is the option to do that. That's how you can change the number of decimal places. For some reason, it doesn't like to display this first 0. So when you see .00, that does mean a 0. In this case, the 0 is simply a category. But if we had a 0 in age, then this would be interpreted as a genuine 0 years old. At the moment, this cell just has a dot. So this here has some missing data in it. And I bet you if we looked down, we would find that there are more. So there are 2 steps to this. And again, this is the second point in which you can go quite wrong. So if you find that later on you follow the handbook and you're getting quite different results from what's in the handbook, this could be the other point at which this has happened. So the first thing to do is to replace anything that's missing with some sort of code or value. The second step is to then tell SPSS that anything with that code or value means it's missing. So to do this, we go to transform, then we go into recode into the same variables. Now I'm going to move over everything that isn't an A. So anything that's got text, I'm going to ignore. I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard, and that will allow me to select multiple ones at the same time. So again, I'm holding down Shift, moving them over. I then go here to old and new variables, and I always have to refer to the handbook whenever I'm doing this particular bit, just to make sure that I am actually selecting the right option. So it's system or user missing. So don't get scared by all these different options in SPSS. This particular thing we're doing now is actually one of the more complicated things that you'll probably end up doing. SPSS is pretty user-friendly on the whole. And when it is something complicated like this, just refer to the handbook. That's what I've been doing, for the past 17 years. I realised today that's how long I've been using SPSS for. So don't worry, just refer back to the handbook if you need to. It's not a problem. You're not expected to remember everything. And then in here, what we have to do is we have to put a value that is not naturally occurring in our data set. So for example, I'm going to pick -1. I know that I haven't got a single -1 in this particular data set. Be careful in your own data sets. You never know. It is possible you could have a -1. So you have to pick a value which is not naturally occurring in your data. It could be a -0.9999, something like that. So a lot of people will choose a long and complicated number. -1 usually does the job, as long as you definitely haven't got any minus figures just naturally in your data set. Once you've chosen what you're going to use, you just press add. So this is now telling SPSS any cell which is missing, hasn't got anything in it, just pop a -1 in. Continue. And then OK. Now this output box here, this appears whenever you actually perform something in SPSS. This is where the result will happen. This is where you'll find all your results and all your tables. So at the moment, it's just letting me know that I've done something. That's all that's doing for now. Can you see that we now have a -1 in that cell which was previously empty? We are at a very dangerous point because at the moment, if we did anything on age, -1 would be included as a genuine data set. So you can imagine how that would affect an average. It would start to bring things down a lot. So the next step is also very important. What we have to do is we have to go to this missing column and we have to tell SPSS, if you see a -1 in this column, you have to assign it as missing. So again, I just clicked around here on the cell. It automatically brought this up. Now, you can't press anything else because we haven't actually selected it. So you have to select this one, which then allows you to just type in whatever it was you chose as your missing value, which in this case was -1. And you just have to go down and just repeat this for all of your values, except you don't have to bother doing it for the name of the people because we're not doing anything with the names. Fill in the rest of them here. Okay, so as I say, this is the second point at which things can go wrong. So in some ways, setting up the data just to begin is a bit more tiring and involves a bit more thought than actually performing the stats tests, which is probably what you'll come to realize later on. But hopefully now our data are now all ready and all prepared. I could easily hand over my data to somebody else and they would know exactly what's gone on here. All the data that is missing would be assigned as missing, all my codes are in, maybe I would have added some labels as well, and I've even put in what kind of data we have. So this is really good practice when you have your data set to just make sure it's all set out nicely. So I'll just go back to the chat in case we have any questions. Yep, no, I don't think we've got any other questions. That's fine. So the next thing I'm going to show you is descriptive statistics. So descriptive statistics, you have probably done these in Excel and you've probably had to use formula and drag things down and it's probably taken you a few moments. This is the great thing about SPSS. You can get information about your data really, really quickly. And to do most things in SPSS, you're going to use this Analyze button here. So as you can see, when I say that it's user-friendly, it is really quite user-friendly because we want descriptive statistics. And look, it's labeled as such right here. Also comparing means. So if you were in yesterday's webinar, we talked about comparing means, whether it was 2 means and it was a t-test, or maybe it was more than one and it was an ANOVA. Well, look what we've got here. We've got a one sample t-test, our independent t-test, our paired, and we've even got a one-way ANOVA here. So this is quite a straightforward way if you aren't really used to using SPSS. And you remember that we talked about, well, what happens when you haven't got normally distributed data? Well, you have a non-parametric test. And what have we got here? We've got non-parametric tests. So again, you usually can find your test fairly easily in this column. We are going to look at descriptive statistics. There's quite a few different options for descriptive statistics. The ones that you're most likely to use are probably these top 4. These are the most common. So frequencies is really simple. So let's say that we just want to know how many men and women were on the Titanic. Then that's what we would do here. So frequencies is not so good when you've got something like age or fair, which are scale data. But they are very good when you have something that falls into a category because it will literally count the totals for you. Whereas descriptives is the opposite to that. So descriptives really needs to have scale data. So descriptives is going to give you things like your means, your medians, interquartile ranges, 95% confidence intervals, that kind of thing. Explore, again, it sort of works on a similar basis to descriptives. Your dependent variable, the thing that you're, or say your dependent variable, in fact, not if you want to look at age, for example, if you wanted to look at the mean age of people who survived, then this explore option allows you to break that up. So whereas this option, and I will show you this now, will really just give you information about, say, the age, we could actually put multiple things in if we wanted to. It will look at them separately, but I don't want to over confuse things at the moment. This one here is, like I say, it's only really going to be useful when you've got data that you can generate a mean from. So if we press continue, we now get some data, whereas the explore option, I'll show you in a minute, actually allows you to break this up then into different categories. So we could look at the age of people who survived and the age of people who died. So that's the advantage with the explore option. So this is just the descriptives option. This is the output that I told you about, that whenever you perform anything in SPSS, it gives you the result. So what this is telling us here is that entered into this analysis, there were 1,046 people or observations, and whatever it is that you're looking at, each row is an individual of some description. It might be a plant, it doesn't have to be a person, whatever it is that you're looking at in your particular study. And you can see that we must have some missing data because we know we have about an extra 300 passengers here. We have 1,300, so we know we must have some missing data. This doesn't tell us much about the missing data, but all it's telling us is once it's excluded the missing data, this is what we've been left with. And of these, the minimum age was 0.17 years. This is probably a baby. The maximum age was 80 years old. Here, where it's got some very fine lines, you can see that both of these values relate to the mean. So when it says mean and then the statistic, this is basically saying this is the mean, okay? So 29.88 years was the mean age for people on board the Titanic. This was the standard error of that mean, and this is the standard deviation, which is used to help calculate the standard error. So it's very simple, but you can see how much information you've got very quickly there, much quicker than if you were using Excel. So if I show you the explore option, so again, whatever goes in the dependent list has to be scale. So we can put age in, and then we can put survived. If I go to statistics, there might be other things that I'm interested in, perhaps percentiles. I'm going to leave it like that for now. If I go to plots, I can choose to have a stem and leaf plot. I might want to put a histogram in there as well. Now, I will, well, actually I won't, because normally I would show you this on the t-test SPSS session that I would normally do. But again, let me know if you would like that, because I can put that on sometime later in July. Now, if you were testing the data, particularly for a t-test, to see whether or not they had a normal distribution, you would just tick this box. It's that simple. You would tick the box and then you would interpret the outcome. Interpreting it takes a little bit of thought, but it's fine. That's what you would tick if you're interested in knowing how to do that. And the other thing is that when you have something like a t-test, it's very good practice to test your different groups separately. So rather than just testing if age altogether follow a normal distribution, what this is doing is it would actually break it down by the age of those that survived. Are they a normal distribution? And the age of those that died, are they a normal distribution? So it actually looks at the two categories separately, and that is good practice for your t-test. Not necessarily needed for other tests, but for a t-test, it is quite good if you can look at them separately. So that's what you would tick if you were interested in doing a normality test. It's not even the only way you can do it in SPSS. You can also go to that non-parametric option that I showed you. You can also do a normality test using that button too. So I think that's all we need to look at there. I'm just going to press OK. It might take a few moments to load. So now what it's done is it's giving us the age. So again, it's all based on age broken down into these two categories, whether or not they died or whether they survived. So what this is telling us here is that we knew in 100% of cases who had survived and who had died. We don't have any missing data here. That's what that's telling us. However, for age, in the category of died, we did know the age of about 76.5% of them, and we did know the age of those that survived for 85.4%, but you can see that we have some missing data here. It even tells us how many missing data we have. In this group, we have 190 missing data, whereas in the survived group, we have 73 for age. So we did not know the age of 73 people who survived, and we did not know the age of 190 people who died. That kind of makes sense, that the people who died, it's much harder to ask them their age. So that's what I kind of would expect to see. And this is another good tip in statistics. Are the data looking like you would expect them to look? You know, is there anything that looks a bit odd? It's always worth just having a little look to see if that's the case. You then get a rather large table, which looks a bit overwhelming and confusing at first. Now, age is in this left column, which means that all of these values relate to age. So this mean of those that died is the age. So this means 30.5 years old. So all these values are in years. Whereas this section where there's a line, so everything in this section relates to those that survived. So the mean age of those that survived was 28.9 years old. 30 years old for the mean of those that died. We then have a confidence interval here, the lower and the upper. We have a median, 28 years old for those that died. We have another median here. Again, it's the same, 28 for those that survived, and so on. So you have a lot of information given in this table. And you can see again how quickly all that information has been generated compared to if you were trying to get it from SPSS. So now we have a histogram for those that died. So this is again about the age. And then we have a histogram for those that survived. And again, this is about age. It also gives you the number of samples that were included, and it even gives you the mean and the standard deviation. And again, this makes sense with what we know of the data. So we know that on average, and we know the average age because we did our first here. So this is not taking survived or died into account. It's literally saying what's the average age of those that boarded the Titanic. So not the average age. It's just saying what the minimum and the maximum here is. Here is the average. So this is the mean. The mean age is 29.8 years old of those that boarded the Titanic. This is their maximum age. This is their minimum age. So we already know that 29 is about the average age of people on board. We then know that people who died, the average age was about 30, and those that survived was about 28. So this is not massively surprising, and our histograms agree with this. Again, most people are around 30 years old, and again, around 30 years old. But what's nice is if you look here, you can see that we have quite a big peak in those that survived who were very, very young. So these are most likely going to be the young babies and the toddlers. And again, that makes sense with what we know. They would be prioritized to get off the ship. They would be easy to get into lifeboats that are only small. So it makes sense with what we know of our data. So it is really important to always think back. Does this make sense with what I expect from my data? In this case, we've also got a box plot that's been generated. I'm going to show you how you can generate graphs separately in a moment. And again, you might be really familiar with box plots, but I've got a nice little labeled graph in the actual handbook here, just in case you're not that familiar with a box plot. So our box plot is showing our median here on this line. We then have our lower quartile range and our upper quartile range. So what this really is saying is between here and here, this is where 50% of our data lie. We then have our minimum value, and then we have our maximum value, and then anything that is quite far away from our maximum value is automatically assigned as an outlier. So the outliers are up here. So that's what you're seeing on your box plot. So descriptive statistics, as I say, is very useful. And as I say, you can go to frequencies, but this time it would be better to have nominal information. I can't remember what's here. So again, this wouldn't be any use to us. There is no point. We can't generate a mean. We can't generate a mean from the gender. But let's see what happens when we do this. So now this tells us that we have 843 males and we have 466 females. We haven't got anything that's missing, so we've managed to get the gender of everybody. So that's fantastic. So again, you can see how we've managed to just grab that information really quickly. The other thing that you might find useful is the cross tabs. This is particularly useful when you're doing chi-squared analysis. So I'm just going to try and pop 2. I don't know if having 3 is going to be a bit complicated. Let's see what we get. So this is a little bit more complicated, but what this is doing is it's trying to break down all these different categories. So it's saying the number of people who died who were in first class was 123, whereas the number of people who survived in first class was 200. Then it goes down second class, third class, and you can see that we've got quite a big difference here. In third class, those that died were 528 compared to only 181 who survived. So this cross tab is literally putting one category across the top, one category down here, and then it's giving you the tallies for each individual combination. So that can be quite a useful thing to have. And as I say, you can use that as part of your chi-squared. And yesterday, I sent you some slides which have lots of videos for lots of different tests. So again, please feel free to look at any of those videos if you want to know how to do any of those tests in SPSS. So the last thing that I wanted to show you today, and I might even finish a bit early for once, which is not like me, but that's great because it means that if you've got any questions or there's anything you want me to show you, then we've got a bit of time to do that. The last thing I want to show you are how to do graphs. There are some new fancy options for how you can build your graphs. I am old school. As I said, I realised today that I've actually been using SPSS for 17 years. That's when I started my undergraduate degree and I was first started to use it. So because I'm a bit of an old fogey, I am quite attached to my old buttons. So if you ever see me going here to legacy dialogues, or if any of my instructions tell you about legacy dialogues, it's because I like these buttons. They do what they say on the tin. They're a lot more straightforward. When you go into here, it's it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on here. So by all means, if you want to explore that, please do. You might find that once you've sat down and learnt about it, that maybe it's easier than some of these. But I just think these are a lot easier really to look at. So to be honest, we've already made a histogram by putting in age, but I just want to show you how easy it is to do it here with the graphs function. I'm literally just going to pop age in there and press OK. And now I've got a histogram, and it was that easy. It's even given me the mean, standard deviation, and the total number of samples that were included. So this isn't taking any survived or died into account. It's literally just giving us a graph for everybody's age who boarded the Titanic. That simple. Maybe I want to do another graph. Maybe I want to do a scatter graph. And actually what's quite nice is you can actually do a 3D one. So if any of you in the future want to do something called principal component analysis, sometimes you will actually want to have a scatter graph with 3 different variables on, and you can actually do that quite easily in SPSS, so that's quite good. So the only things we can possibly put in here are scale variables for a scatter graph. Nothing else is going to work really. Unfortunately, these are the only ones that we have that are scale, which means this is not going to be an attractive graph. As you can see, not an attractive graph, but I've shown you how easy it is to draw that graph. And then finally, even though we have already done a box plot, this is another way you can do the box plot, and just going to do simple and define. And what I'm going to show here, let's say let's do fair, and then let's do whether or not they survived. Let's try that. What I want to show you now is how you can edit the graphs. So the brilliant thing, and you've just seen it happen, is I did not have to rearrange my data. I did not have to use a formula, generate an average, or generate a standard error. Didn't have to do any of that. I had all my data completely raw, and SPSS just drew graphs for me. So that's a massive advantage over Excel. And in a fairness, SPSS has made the graph interface look a lot more attractive than it used to. But editing the graphs in SPSS is not user-friendly. It really isn't. So one thing that I haven't shown you yet is a lot of the time you can actually double click these outputs that appear, and you can do more things with them, which to be honest is a good thing. But there are certain stats tests when you come to do them. For example, doing the non-parametric version of the one sample t-test, when you come to do that, unless you knew to click on the table, you wouldn't know that you can actually get more information. So it's a blessing and a curse. Let's see, I think I heard there we go. Let's just add you back. So what I've done now is I've just double clicked on my graph. It's now grayed out in the output, and it's produced this chart editor window, the most non-user friendly window ever to exist. And I'm going to now change the color of my graphs. So to do this is not straightforward. So if I click on one of them, can you see? This is just not accessible at all. But can you see that there's a very, very faint yellow line that's now surrounded both of them? So this means both of these are now selected. So if I now double click, we now get this properties option. So this allows me to change the color. I can do apply and then close, and now I've changed the color. If I only want to change the color of one of them, I have to click again once, and now you can see that only this one is selected, not this one. And then I can double click this one again, and I can even change that color again, and I can make that different. Other options, there are some shortcuts along the top, but you can also find them by going to elements here. So can you see how hide data labels is not currently available? You can't actually select it, even though we've clearly got some labels on here. So again, what you have to do is you have to try and click somewhere on the labels so that all the labels are selected. Then you can go to Elements, and now the option appears. So now you can press Hide Data Labels, which, as you can see, looks a lot smarter. And there's other options here as well. Options, so you can add a title. So perhaps I want to say fair of people on the Titanic. So it's not too dissimilar from Excel in that respect. You can add different text box, footnotes, you can hide the grid lines, and then you can press close. I don't think you can. Okay, I don't even know what half of these options do. What have I just clicked then? Hopefully I have not just lost you in the presentation. Hopefully you can also see that. Type in the chat box if you can't see anything. And then I think if we just shut this down, it closes, but it does sort of save it, and now it puts it back in our output here. So it's back in our output window. And the other thing to point out before I finish up and open it for questions, there's a little asterisk here. That means it's not saved. The same goes for our data set. It's not saved. And these two things are saved separately. So this would become a data set that you save, and this would become an output that you save. I would recommend that you save the output and give it a very informative name, like Introduction to SPSS, or this is for a t-test using this particular data set, because the number of times you might want to just flick back and look at one of your tables, look at your results. You don't want to have to go through all the analysis again. So it's really good if you can save this. And you remember earlier when I was showing you how you can download SPSS, I mentioned the Amos program. So that would be if you didn't have the main package, so you couldn't do all this, but maybe you had some of these files saved and you just wanted to view them. That's what that package, I believe, I've not tried it myself, but I think that's what it does. I think it allows you to then have a look at any of your outputs. Okay, so they are the main things that I wanted to show you today. So I'm just going to go back here into the chat box. Does anyone have any other questions about SPSS? Nothing too complicated at this time. Have you got anything to do with what I've shown you today, or have you got any requests maybe for an SPSS drop-in in the future? Just pop anything you want there in the chat. Okay, great. Oh, finding duplicates. I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure. When you say finding duplicates, do you mean a whole variable has been duplicated? So maybe you've got the same column twice? Maybe not a multivariate analysis. Maybe I would need to make it first. But I will note down that you would like that, and I will look at that. And for example, same patient entered twice in error. That's a really good question. That's not something that I've actually looked at. I'm going to have a look for that. Tell you what, I will look to see. I'm going to make a note of that now. If you've got duplicated data, and I will send you an email if I find something. Okay, great. What are the main differences between the two versions? Yeah, so as I say, the differences between 24 and 25, if you want me to get really technical, the only thing that I've actually noticed of major significance was when I did a two-way ANOVA, I was checking one of the assumptions, which is equality of variances. So I was doing something called a Levene's test. And when I did the Levene's test, I noticed on my two-way ANOVA that with certain data sets, I was getting slightly different values. It was decreasing the degrees of freedom, so it was kind of making it more conservative. And I can't get to the bottom why. I've emailed SPSS, I've asked lots of stats people, no one can really give me an answer. But it only seemed to happen when I had a two-way ANOVA, which had a non-significant interaction. This probably means nothing to most of you right now. To be honest, it's probably more of a problem if you're an undergraduate, because if your lecturer is using a different version to you and they want you to have an exact value the same as the value they're getting, it might give you a different, oh look, Paul's try data identity duplicate cases. See, Paul's on it. Paul's great. Fantastic. Yeah, give that a go. So to be honest, that was the major difference that I noticed. Oh, great. We've got David here from Biostats as well. Oh, great. Yeah, they do some courses on multivariate analysis. Yeah, fantastic. And in fact, I'm going to show you, if you go to, if you do University of Liverpool biostatistics, you can go here, and then down here we've got courses and workshops. So you can see that the next few are coming up in November, so they're a little bit away, but we've got a whole series here. So logistic regression. So I'm in the middle of trying to write an online tutorial for the different regressions. I myself have done logistic regression before for my PhD, but I haven't ever done a linear, so I'm very much learning like you. So if you would like to have a look at some of these multivariable analyses, then I would strongly recommend going to the experts here, biostatistics. So they've got a lot going on. Also, if you don't want to use SPSS, and you do not have to use SPSS, it's just that SPSS is quite user-friendly if you are quite new to statistics. But if you would like to do things a bit more advanced, then R is a really good program. There's a much steeper learning curve, but once you get used to it, there's a lot more that you can do with R. So they've also got courses here on how to use R. eViews, I don't know what eViews are, I'm afraid. I'm not quite sure what that is. So to be honest, at Know How, we don't want to end up trying to learn every single piece of software that's out there, because we don't want to become sort of software teachers. You know, really, I want to show you how to do statistics, but it's very difficult to show you statistics without having at least one piece of software to do statistics on. So that's another reason why we use SPSS, and also because I myself have been using it for a long time. Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, again, I've never used that particular SATs package, so you can imagine that it would take a bit of time. But all these requests are fantastic. And if you can put them in the feedback when I send you the link, because I have to persuade other people that you guys want this, that you guys want extra support on different packages. So if I can prove that there's a demand, then it might be that I can talk to other people at the university, whether it's postgraduates, whether it's staff who are experts in these packages, and I can maybe bring them in to do sort of one-off webinars and things like that. So if there is anything you want to know about, you know, put it in the feedback, and I'll give you that link now. And you know, hopefully we can get quite a good, you know, community together, really, of people who are experts in all these different things. So this is the feedback link here. So yeah, anything that you want in the future, you know, pop it in the feedback where it asks you about future sessions. Okay, so I think I've regression analysis. I won't be doing a webinar anytime soon on regression analysis. As I say, I'm still ironing out all the creases and making sure that I completely understand regressions as I should do. So once I've had my online tutorial done and I've had it checked by my colleagues, and I've got lots of colleagues in the different departments who work on statistics. I've got a very good friend in the maths department who is very good as well, who looks over, and she's pretty much writing the tutorials with me. Once that tutorial is done, that's brilliant. I can share that tutorial. It will go on the VLEs, Vital and Canvas, which means you'll have full access to it. And it means then that I can start offering workshops and webinars on the regressions as well. But as David said, if you can hang on till November, then the biostats department will run these sessions. And I think that they are run at least twice a year, maybe a bit more. So it's always worth having a look at their website just to see if there's anything. And they are really aimed at people like yourselves, postgraduate staff, so they are a kind of higher level, if you see what I mean. Trying to decide variables and tests. Well, yes, yeah, exactly. There are quite a few books, so I think on some of the slides that I might have sent out recently, I might have linked some. A lot of what I know is a bit biology biased, but there is a very good book on getting started in biology with statistics. I can't remember the full name off the top of my head. I've got some links. Yeah, twice. So David's confirmed it's about twice a year that biostats. So if you look at the slides, so when I send you slides after the webinars, I've usually got a list of references near the end. Take a look at those because I've usually put a few links in there. Yeah. So if anybody's having any difficulty with Handshake, so the university has just moved over to Handshake as a way of booking events. Now, staff, I don't think have accounts with Handshake. So what you might have to do is email careers. I think it's literally just careers at Liverpool. Drop them an email and just let them know that you can't log on to Handshake or you're having difficulty booking for events. And I think that they will set you up with an account so that you can book on. But we are talking to them about this. We're hoping to get a bit more access for staff. But to be honest, don't worry if you can't register, because with it being a webinar, there isn't really a number limit. It's only in case 100 people came to the webinar and 100 people asked questions, and obviously I couldn't answer every single question, so that's the only reason that we put some sort of cap on. But I think to be honest, we've been getting about 20 or 30, so that's fine. Just come along. Oh yeah. Oh, that's fine. Just do that. Yeah. If it is full, just sneak in with the link. That's absolutely fine. As I say, it's not really an issue with it being webinars and things like that. And I'll just give you our email address as well, in case you have any further questions. So tomorrow, I think I've got a session on testing for normal distributions and t-tests. So I will show you how you can interpret the tables with the normal distributions and with the t-tests, and also the non-parametric versions. I won't really have time to show you how to do them in SPSS, but I will share with you a handbook that I've made on how you can do them in SPSS. It's pretty easy. It's got nice screenshots. You should be able to follow it. And then I think the last one that I have this week is about ANOVAs. Usually, again, that one would actually be a bit of a combination of showing you how to do it in SPSS and giving you the information about it, but it is quite difficult because obviously it's harder for me to know where you're all up to. I can't look at your screens to see how you're getting on using SPSS. So I've changed that one slightly, so it's a bit more interactive and it's a bit more about information about ANOVAs. But again, I have got a handbook on ANOVAs, so I will also send you that link. I will give you the link to do ANOVAs in SPSS. Yeah, so are there any other questions before we log off and I actually finish on time for once? No? Okay, well, great. If you do think of any, there's our email address. Please feel free to email me. And yeah, good luck with practicing using SPSS. Yes, I will. I'm going to stop that recording right now.